Tale of Two Cuties is the 15th episode of the 6th season of Cheers. This is directed by Michael Zinberg, and as always there will be spoilers from now as I go through the episode and share some thoughts. And irritatingly for me, I could remember this episode really well. My memory in general is not that good, so when I'm rewatching Cheers, there are some things that I haven't remembered, but this one I could remember well. So I'd love to know if you're watching this for the first time, or if you couldn't remember what happened. Is it obvious? Is the final outcome obvious? Or was it a surprise? I will, of course, go into more detail when we get there. It starts off, not at Cheers, actually. We're down at the hospital, and the gang at Cheers arrive with balloons and soft toys, and they're looking through the glass at Carla's twins and making faces. And then we see Carla off to the side whistling, and they realise they're looking at the wrong twins. They slide up to Carla, look at her twins, and decide the other babies are cuter. It's a nice way to establish that Carla has had her twins. We then, we have a moment that actually threw me for a second. Cliff comes in and says, into Cheers, we're back at the bar, and Cliff says, "Pardon my appearance, everybody," and Rebecca replies, "We always do." And it kind of threw me for a second that Rebecca was insulting Cliff. She then followed it up with, "Sorry, I was covering for Carla." But it just took me a second that there was a bit of banter between Rebecca and Cliff. And Cliff has brought in this Lust for Justice book, which Frasier thinks is trash. And then throughout the episode, he ends up really getting into it and other things. And we'll come back to this on one other occasion. But they did something with that I don't agree with, but we'll talk about that when we get there. Rebecca then takes a call in her office from Evan Drake, and Anthony and Annie come into the bar, and Sam suggests that Annie fills in for Carla as a relief waitress because they're struggling to find any employment. And initially, Anthony's not happy with this, so they go off to talk about it. And Rebecca then comes back into the bar saying that they're going to play a guessing game. Mr. Drake has asked her to hire a young girl he knows as the relief waitress, and they make some suggestions for why this could be. It could be a relative or somebody he's helping out, and of course they come to the conclusion, or at least Rebecca comes to the conclusion, that this young girl is sleeping with Mr. Drake, and that's why he has to get her to hire her. And needless to say, Rebecca is not very happy about this. Annie then comes in and says that she'll take the job. Obviously, Rebecca's just been told to hire this person called Laurie. We'll talk more about her in a moment. And Annie finally agrees to work just for tips, which seems unfair, but I guess it's better than nothing, I suppose. It definitely isn't a situation anybody should be in, but Annie is then working in the rest of the episode. We cut to the day that Laurie is meant to be starting, and Rebecca refers to her as Evan's little tart. Not in front of her, but it does get worse. And eventually, even though she's late, Laurie does turn up, and Rebecca's first words to her, "You must be the slut." And I did think, how are you going to get out of that? How can you possibly say anything after that without having just called her a slut? And actually, she finds a way. She manages to say, "You're here to fill the slot." Quick thinking. I like it. And here we have Bobbie Eakes playing Laurie. And honestly, she's a really likeable character. There's absolutely nothing about her that doesn't work as a character. But needless to say, Rebecca is not very happy. Annie then asks Sam for advice. And she gives Sam a small kiss on the cheek. And Anthony, in disguise, had been sitting at the back of the bar, or at least off to the back. And of course, as soon as he sees Annie kissing Sam, he jumps up and they end up having this big fight. And what happens after that with Annie and Sam gets a little bit awkward. But before we get in with that, I want to say the one thing that I really don't agree with. Frasier has really gotten into these crime shows and these crime books and things, and the gang end up spoiling something that Frasier hadn't been able to catch up with. So Frasier, in retaliation, spoils a bunch of things. And I won't say what they are because I don't want to spoil them. They are things that are very popular, things that are very well known, one of which refers to Star Wars. I won't say any more than that, but I'm sure you'll know which big Star Wars reveal I mean if you're aware of it. But the thing I hate it when anybody gives spoilers, because even though it's common knowledge, that person might have been fortunate enough to avoid that spoiler. So don't ruin the experience for them just because you assume they know. But it's even worse when a film or TV show includes spoilers for another film or TV show, because how would they like it if somebody spoiled things for them? Imagine if I went to somebody who was just starting watching Cheers and told them the outcome of Sam and Diane. Even though it's common knowledge after the fact, many people know what happens with them. If somebody's just starting their journey with that TV series or that film, they may have been fortunate enough to avoid spoilers. And it shouldn't be ruined for them just because most people are aware. And as I said, I don't like it when a film or TV show includes spoilers for other films or TV shows, because they, more than anybody, should be aware of the importance of not spoiling things. And it irritated me so much. And the Star Wars thing was actually brought up a couple of times in the episode, so they were really leaning into that. And I mean, when I watched Star Wars for the first time a couple of years ago, I was aware of the spoiler. But had I not been, apparently when it was revealed, it was this huge thing and nobody saw it coming. So I guess the message there is, don't spoil things for people just because most people are aware of the twists or the big spoilers. And if you're writing for a TV show or a film, have some self-awareness and don't include those things in the film or TV show, because you wouldn't like it if people spoiled the ending of the things you're creating. Let's move on from that. Annie refers to Sam as my Sam, and Rebecca is interrogating Laurie very inappropriately. It's kind of a very chaotic atmosphere in Cheers at the moment. And then Annie basically is a version of Carla in a lot of ways. She kisses Sam and throws herself onto the bar in a way we've seen Carla do before. And honestly, the casting there is just absolutely fantastic. I think they did such an amazing job. And Anthony sees Annie kissing Sam. And it is worth noting here that Sam did not kiss her back. His hands were in the air. He was trying to get her away from him. And Anthony is not happy with this, but he's just got the job as the new assistant night manager at a burger joint, and Annie is suddenly smitten with him again. And we actually find out that Sam got him this job. So all's well that ends well for Annie and Anthony. We then have more awkwardness between Laurie and Rebecca. Laurie asks Rebecca if she can take her lunch at a certain time so that she can go to lunch with Mr. Drake. And Rebecca decides to interrogate Laurie. And she says, "Do you love Evan Drake?" And Laurie says, "Well, yes." And Rebecca ultimately ends up slapping Laurie. Rebecca has started to show increasing signs of being unhinged, and this is definitely one of those moments where there was just no reason for her to slap Laurie. And it just so happens that Mr. Drake comes into the bar at that time, and we find out that Mr. Drake is Daddy. Norman Cliff saying Daddy was very, very funny. They kind of scuttled off back to the other side of the bar. They didn't want any involvement in this. Quite right. And again, as with calling her a slut, I kind of thought, how are you going to get out of this? Well, Rebecca decided to say she had a nerve disorder. And Sam backed her up on this, saying she was dropped as a baby, and Rebecca's flailing her arms everywhere. And it seems like they got away with it. It's not clear completely whether Mr. Drake believed her, but certainly he's not pushing it any further. And Rebecca had accidentally thwacked Sam in the face because her arms were flailing everywhere. And she looks up at his nose to see what it's like, and she basically cries in disgust and runs away. Kind of harsh, considering Sam had just helped her tell a lie. That's a harsh thing to do to Sam, and Sam looks in the mirror and is not disgusted with what he sees, and he goes after Rebecca. And then Carla comes in. Carla is back, and she comes in with the twins, one in the front and one in the back, and she asks Norm what's been happening. Not much. And Norm asks her, and she says just the usual. And it was sweet. It was really nice to have Carla back in the bar, because it's been a few episodes, so definitely nice to have her back. And in general, it's a really solid, kind of chaotic episode. As I said at the beginning, I remembered that Laurie was Mr. Drake's daughter, but I can't remember if I worked that out beforehand. So I'd love to know if either you can remember your initial reaction, or if you've just watched this for the first time, or you couldn't remember that part. Did you work it out? Is it obvious? I really wish I could remember my initial reaction to this, but certainly watching it now, even though I knew what was coming, I still really thoroughly enjoyed it. Tale of Two Cuties is definitely a very interesting episode with quite a few brilliant moments. The spoiler moment I absolutely hate, but other than that, I can't really fault it. Definitely not a bad episode.